Everyone, my name is Sarah Avery, and I am the Executive Director of Quanta Change. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, do you ever find yourself feeling like you need to explain yourself to people, or maybe you just do it a lot? You just find yourself explaining yourself over and over again why you've done something, why you're thinking about doing something, your reasoning for doing something, or just to make sure that they've seen that you have done something or behaved in a certain way. Maybe you're kind of like me and you find yourself rehearsing over and over and over in your head how you're going to explain yourself. Does that sound familiar? Do you feel in some way like you need other people to understand you, why you're doing something, why you've done something, or make sure that they've seen that you've done something or been some certain way? Do you even maybe find yourself with people in your life who tend not to really be very interested in fully listening to you, fully understanding what you're saying, where you're coming from, and yet even though no matter what you say or do, they're really just not hearing you, and yet you just feel like you have to keep trying? Does any of that sound familiar? Okay. So have you tried working on this? Have you done therapy or some other kind of self-help work to 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 find a way through this, to find a way to be more comfortable with yourself and what you're doing, and to be able to just be instead of feeling like you're having to explain yourself all the time? Has that helped? Have you found you're more comfortable, that you have more of an internal sense that you're just okay just being yourself instead of feeling like you need other people to see something about you? Um, have you found yourself disengaging from people who just aren't interested in understanding you? Um, if so, if you've found help in some kind of work that you've done, that is fantastic. It's really important to find what works for you so that you can really be you and enjoy your life and feel good being yourself. So if you found something that's allowed you to do more of that, fantastic. If not, if you're still feeling like you're really struggling with this issue, first of all, you're not alone, and it is not your fault. It's not because you haven't tried hard enough at the methods you've been trying. It's really because those methods have not been able to get to the root of the problem, which is something called learned distress. So, learned distress is the Quanta Change term for the feeling that there is something wrong with you being just the way that you are. You absorbed this very early in life before you had any choice in the matter. You absorbed it from how the people around you felt about being themselves, and it came to be how you feel about being yourself in the negative side of things. And as you were absorbing this learned distress, your brain was also developing a survival mechanism to allow you to, well, live with this feeling that there's something wrong with you, to try and manage it, cope with it, control it. And also, your survival mechanism allowed you to fit well with the people around you. But that also becomes how you survive throughout life. So you keep feeling those negative feelings and you keep surviving that same way. Often you keep finding the same kinds of people around you, or you keep finding yourself in the same sorts of patterns with people. Does that sound familiar? I hope this makes a little sense of why that keeps happening for you. And so these survival mechanisms and learned distress, there are 6 basic patterns of them. And at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you what those 6 patterns are and tell you how you can find out for free which one of those patterns you have. But for now, what I'll say is that the absolute top goal of either any of those 6 survival mechanisms, including the one that you have, is to try and overcome the biggest piece of learned distress that each and every one of us on the planet has. And that is the feeling that we don't matter just for being ourselves. And so the survival mechanisms then says, okay, if you don't matter, then we have to try and make you matter, because the most fundamental need we have as human beings is to matter, being ourselves, so that we can be in a society in which we are by situation interdependent with each other. And so mattering is extremely important. And so our survival mechanism gives us a way to try and make ourselves matter in the presence of not feeling just that we matter just for being ourselves. So there's several different ways in which survival mechanisms can make us feel like we have to explain ourselves to other people. So for some people, it's a sense that I can't do everything on my own. I'm going to really need some help, some input, some guidance, some buy-in, some validation from other people all the time. And so, as you can imagine, that pattern this is my pattern, by the way, this pattern really lends itself to feeling like you need to constantly explain yourself to other people. Another couple patterns, actually, you may feel like you need people to see, you need to make sure people see that you have done things the right way. Or maybe you might say it more like, I have done things the way that I should, and I'm always living the way that I should. And I need to make sure that people see that and see that there's nothing wrong with me. So that's a pattern that buries learned distress and then tries to say, okay, the way I survive and make myself matter is to do everything the right way or the way that I should. There's another pattern where the survival mechanism is, believe it or not, prove nothing ever works for me. And people with the survival mechanism find, just by the way that life works for them because of their survival mechanism, that keeps happening, that nothing really works for them. And so very often they are explaining themselves to say, see, I'm not being lazy. And they are not lazy people. And they are usually extremely smart people who are doing things really well. And yet things keep not working out. And so they keep explaining, hey, see, I've done this thing that I'm supposed to do, and it's still not working out right. So maybe one of those really resonated for you. In any case, each of those is a way that we try and make ourselves matter in order to survive on the planet. So maybe you heard that and it was a total revelation to you. You're starting to make some connections in your life. Or maybe you heard it and thought, well, I've done 30 years of therapy and I've really examined these things, and I haven't heard it described in quite that language before, but yeah, I've heard that before. I know this about myself. Why hasn't knowing this helped me change it? I know all this. I'm sick of knowing about this, Sarah. I know about it. It hasn't helped me change anything. Well, the reason that just knowing these patterns hasn't helped you change anything is because of something I call the rational brain roadblock. This is a phenomenon by which, when your rational brain is operating, there is a wall of protection around your sense of self. Your sense of self stores how you feel about being yourself, including your learned distress and your survival mechanism, and the very core of who you are, which is called your natural well-being. So your sense of self's job is to automatically generate all the situations that are going on in your life all the time out of that way that you feel about being yourself. And when your rational brain is operating, there's a wall of protection around that sense of self that says, nope, you are not touching this. This is how I survive. This is how I get through life. You're not touching it. So that's why you haven't been able to, say, think your way out of your learned distress in my language. So the good news is that Quanta Change was developed to get you through that rational brain roadblock, to actually get you into your sense of self, to be able to peel out layers of learned distress permanently so that core well-being can expand and take the place that learned distress was sitting. So the way that Quanta Change does that is it works with your brain during sleep, and it does that for two reasons. One is that sleep is when your rational brain is entirely shut down, and so that is when the that wall of protection is deactivated. And so you can actually access your sense of self while you're asleep, to say, I don't want to recharge anymore with feeling bad. I want to recharge with feeling good, because that's the second reason sleep is why Quanta Changes works the way it does, is because sleep is when your sense of self is getting recharged. So what's happening through Quanta Change is that you're recharging with your core well-being, with this feeling at your center that you are just great, just being yourself, that you really do matter just for being yourself, not because you're trying to do something or be some certain way. And so as you recharge with well-being, layers of learned distress, like I said, are peeled off permanently. Well-being expands to take that place. It takes up more and more space in your sense of self. And so the automatic generating force behind all of your situations more and more becomes your core well-being. And in the case of what we're talking about today, this need to explain yourself, need to make yourself matter. Here are some basic things I see happen for people through Quanta Change. I've been doing this work for 22 years. So this is what I've been seeing for these last couple of decades. So one really core thing is that you start to know entirely within yourself that you matter just for being yourself, just because you exist, instead of feeling like I have to be this certain way, or I have to get them to see me in this certain way, validate me, something like that. And one of the things people say more and more is the more they feel entirely within themselves that they matter, they start to say, oh my gosh, I don't really care what people think of me so much anymore. I have always cared what people think of me. I didn't even admit it to other people before, but I really, really cared. And I really don't care. Like, I just feel good being myself. And that's what I want to be in the world. For people who have, like my pattern, this like feeling really reliant on other people, they start to feel like they really have something within them that they can rely on, that is their foundation, instead of feeling like they're always grabbing out there for someone that's going to help them, validate them, give them what they need, because they don't have it within themselves. And so in that case, relationships, and I can say this from my own experience, relationships become not so much about I need this person to fill in the holes for me, but relationships become about collaboration and enjoyment of the other person, and expressing ourselves and enjoying them, rather than needing them to come help us. You may start to experience that your own uniqueness is why you're here. Your own uniqueness is what you're here to express, instead of feeling like I have to be this certain right way, or this way I should, or I have to, everything has to fit into this certain way. You just feel like, hey, I'm doing me, and that is good. That feels great, and it works, and it feels so much easier when you just get to do you, instead of feeling like you have to fit in some box. And the last thing I'll say is, in general terms, is that with people who tend not to be so interested in what you have to say, in understanding you, in seeing you, the people who you, or the kind of person at least that you felt like you always had to explain yourself to, I would say one of two things happens. One, you may just not care so much anymore. You may just feel like, hey, whatever, they're going to think what they think, and it really doesn't matter what they think of me, and I just get to be myself. Or you may, in that case, with people who are you're not in some sort of permanent relationship with, like family, or maybe a spouse or a boss or somebody like that, you may find yourself disengaging from that kind of person and saying, yeah, I don't have to do this anymore. Like, that is a hallmark of Quanta Change, is one day just saying, oh, I don't have to do that. The thing that you have felt every day of your life, like you had to do, you all of a sudden say, I don't have to explain myself to them. And it's just this spontaneous feeling inside of you. And the other thing that I see happen is that the more that you feel like you matter, the more other people treat you like you matter. Not because you've said or done something differently, but because they feel that sense that you matter from you, and they treat you more like that. So that's another thing that sometimes happens with some people, not all, who don't seem so invested in listening to you and understanding you. So let me give you a couple of more specific examples from my clientele over the years. So one was a client who has sort of similar to my pattern. She was always feeling like she needed to get input from other people, to be on the same page with them, to get validation for her ideas or decisions from them. And it was really hard as a result to make any decision, even the smallest decision was really difficult for her, because it just felt like, okay, who am I going to check in with? Who's going to tell me this is the right thing to do? Where am I going to get that input or validation for my idea that I need? And so she was really struggling with that. And I wonder if you can relate to that, in this sense of needing people in that way, and then always needing to really explain yourself, explain your reasoning, get them onto the same page with you if you feel like you have a good idea, but needing them to be on the same page. Does that ring a bell at all? So she had done some unlearning on this quite a bit. And one day she started coming to me and saying, hey, I just made this decision and I didn't check in with anybody because I really didn't need to. It was just, I changed our recycling. And it was like $5 extra a month, and it wasn't a big deal to us financially, me and my husband, but I just said, I don't have to check in on this. I'm just going to do it. And she did it, and it was fine. And they have the better recycling. She started coming to me with so many of these things where she said, oh my gosh, I'm not having to overthink things. I'm not having to second guess myself all the time and then go seek input and approval. I'm just doing stuff, and it's so much easier. And let me say that this is never something that I plan out with my clients. I didn't know anything was going on with the recycling. I didn't know any of these specific things she brought to me. We didn't sit down and plan this out. She just, as she changed, as her well-being became more the generating force, her well-being started to say, hey, you could just do this. You've got it. You've got it in you. You can make this decision and just do it. And she was doing that, and she said, oh my gosh, everything is so much easier. Everything's going so much faster than it used to with all of the second guessing and overthinking. So that's one example. Another example is a client of mine who was a super achiever, who was just exemplary in school throughout her career, just one of those people who you can count on for anything and who does everything great. And she was really realizing, as we were starting to work together, that she really needed to not only show that to other people, but also avoid at all costs anyone seeing that there was something wrong with her. I have heard this from so many of my clients who have a similar pattern, that it's fundamentally embarrassing. It feels dangerous, not safe for people to see there's something wrong. The only thing you can let people see is that everything's great, everything's going well, I've done things the way that I should, or the right way, and everything's going that way. There's nothing else to see here. And so folks with this pattern can really find themselves needing to explain themselves in that way and make sure that other people see that they're doing everything the right way. Nothing's wrong here. So is that relatable to you? Does that sound familiar? Do you find yourself saying, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I won't let anybody see if something's going wrong for me. It's embarrassing. Okay, so if that's the case for you, she'd done quite a bit of unlearning, and she had a tendency to have bosses who were pretty dictatorial, these sorts of folks who just really aren't so interested in hearing your input. Even when they've hired you for your expertise, they still don't really want your input, because their survival mechanism is to need to show that they know everything. And so she had a tendency to have a boss like this, and she was in another situation with a boss like this, and she was doing this big project with this boss, collaborating with this boss, and just finding that this boss really didn't care about what she thought. And she was frustrated, and she was doing more layers of unlearning through that. And she got to a place that she said was so new, where she said, oh, you know what? Ultimately, yes, my name's on this project, but it's the boss's show, and it's going to be fine. And I'm just going to let this happen. And it doesn't have to all be the way I know it should be. I can just let it be and kind of let it go. And I know myself. And she said, even if people see my name on this and know something isn't quite right about it, that's okay. I know who I am. I know that I matter. I know that I've done great work here. That's what matters, not what other people think. And she said that was radical in her life. It was so very different from how she had ever felt in a single second of her life. So that really is possible. It's the kind of spontaneous change that comes out of unlearning layers of learned distress. So if that kind of change sounds interesting to you, the first thing to do to find out if this process of quanta change is a good fit for you is to go find out which one of the 6 patterns of learned distress you have. They are called the idealist, the perfectionist, the optimist, the caregiver, the defeatist, and the dictator or benevolent dictator. And so finding out which one of these patterns is not about, if you've done lots of personality tests and you've done lots and lots of work on yourself and you're sick to death of examining the problem, that's not what this is about. This is just finding out what you're going to be peeling layers off of so that you can allow your core well-being, that part of you that knows that you matter just for being yourself, to expand, to become more and more of the generating force in your life. So the way that you find out which pattern you have is you're going to go to my website and take a free, in-depth, scientifically validated personality test that measures your learned distress. And I'm going to send you a free report with your pattern of learned distress and your survival mechanism, how you've been surviving, and how quanta change typically unfolds for someone with that pattern, the kinds of changes that you are probably going to see through quanta change. So if that sounds interesting, I hope that you will go to my website, quantachange.com. That's QUANTA change.com, and click on the free report button. So thank you so much again for joining me today. If you have felt exhausted by needing to constantly explain yourself to other people, I want you to know that it really is possible for that to really quiet down and to come to a place where you're just comfortable being yourself. You just get to be yourself, and it makes everything so much easier. So I hope that you'll go to my website and take the test and get your report. And I hope that you will join me again next Friday for another way in which quanta change really can help you feel good being you. Thank you.